Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am going to just make sure things are streaming everywhere. Hold on. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So my name is Emily, and thank you all for tuning in and for everyone for joining. And I'm going to be the moderator for this panel discussion. And we're going to be talking about a topic that's pretty personal for me, which is transitioning from the arts into tech. And just for some context, during the pandemic, there was a huge wave of people that transitioned from the arts into tech. And I've spoken to a lot of people throughout the years since I made the transition that have been thinking about making the switch or have been curious about it. And everyone's journey is a little bit different. So I wanted to bring together a group of people that also made the switch to talk about their experiences. And we have some incredible panelists tonight. So let's start with a brief round of introductions, and then we can get into the questions. So when you introduce yourself, can you just include what you do as an artist and also what you do in tech? So let's start with Cindy.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Cindy Chin, and Emily, thanks for putting this together. I play the harpist. You can see them in the background, and I am a product designer, or commonly known as a UX UI designer.
Awesome. Ilana?
Hey everyone, my name is Ilana Mercer. I am a software engineer and a violist.
Awesome. Kat?
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Ricafort McCreary. I am a Broadway musical theater performer. So I sang, danced, and acted in 8 Broadway shows in New York, which was a dream come true. And now I am a software engineer at Stitch Fix. I've been there almost exactly 4 years. My 4-year anniversary was this past February.
Oh, that's amazing. Congrats.
Oh, and also I co-founded Artists Who Code with my husband, Scott McCreary, who's here on this call.
Yeah, we'll talk about Arts Code later too. Sarah?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah and I play the violin, and I'm currently a web developer at Georgetown University.
Sweet. And Scott?
Yeah, I didn't put my last name in the input, but my name's Scott McCreary. I'm a cellist, singer. I'm an engineering manager at a startup called Banzhaf Labs.
Awesome. Well, I guess let's get started. I'm curious to know why everyone decided to make the switch. And I think Scott and Catherine, did you switch before the pandemic started?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah, I'd love to hear how you ended up doing that.
Sure. Catherine, do you want to take this one?
No, you take it away. You go first.
Okay. I mean, the short answer is poverty, and but there's also boredom. I think we were, our story briefly is that after college, we moved to New York and we're performing in musical theater, music, and some high highs, but some low lows. And for me, I was getting I had been doing it for about 5 years. I was getting to the point where I was seeing the people who I'd always imagined that I was going to be, and the people who I'd looked up to for a long time. And I was getting to work with them and hearing their stories like, oh, I've got to go on tour for 6 months to pay for my kids' college. And like, I've listened to your Cast album when I was a kid. And if you're having these problems, like maybe it doesn't really get better. And there's also this thing of like, I was spending a lot of time working on myself and honing my craft, but I'm in my 20s. I feel like I should be working and contributing to the world in some, I guess, more meaningful way. And so I started looking around for other things to do. And coding at the time, we were in New York and coding boot camps were very big. And there were all these articles about how, tech companies like needed engineers. And so I bought that and I went to a coding boot camp and came out. And it was harder than it had been sold. Like, it was more difficult than I imagined it would be, but I was still able to get a job at a startup and found, to my delight, that the coding role offered me like more creative freedom actually than the life of a performer. And I was still able to do stuff on the side. And that was 2018 when that happened. So 2 years before COVID. So fortunate, like when COVID hit, we were fortunate, like our company went remote and we were in a good spot. So we felt pretty lucky there, which is part of the reason we started Artists Who Code, is to help people like make this journey that we have made very recently.
Right.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, it also kind of depends. I think a lot of artists like tend to pivot at a certain point in their careers. Like you've been doing it for like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. For me, I'd been in New York for 10 years doing the grind. A lot of the shine of New York had like worn off. And I wasn't like singing NYC from Annie in my head anymore. And I was over it. And, Scott and I had just gotten married and we were like, we really want the power to be able to maybe purchase a home or move somewhere else. And like, if we were still in the grind, we didn't have the power to do that. Like I didn't have the power to say no to artistic projects that I didn't want to do. I felt like I was having to take work that wasn't artistically inspiring. And I was like, wait, the whole point of this is to like do things that inspire me. And then I think finally the thing is, in December 2019, Scott had this really great New Year's resolution. I'm not a New Year's resolution person, but I was inspired by this one. And it was to, I don't know if you remember, Scott, it was to like stop, you'll probably sleep better than I did. Stop being like a follower, like stop trying to like catch the tail end of like a comet that's like kind of dying and has been going on the arts, or specifically being a musical theater performer who is auditioning for other people's work, like because we weren't really in the mode of like creating work. And he was like, I kind of want to go be like a pioneer. And so that's why we started thinking about like doing something different. Like we didn't really know that many artists who had pivoted into tech.
And moving to Arizona, that was part of that.
Literally became pioneer
on that theme. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Did you move to Arizona for the job or
no
because you wanted to?
No, COVID exploded theater and in-person jobs, and so we were remote, could live anywhere, and we'd always, we wanted to be able to buy a house, have a yard, and Kevin had family out here. There are mountains out here. We did kind of like a nationwide search. We were like, what are the cities where there's like a major metro area and a decent art scene, but like low cost of living, sunny, and Phoenix.
We were thinking about it before COVID happened on the theme of this, like, let's be pioneers. And I was really like, oh gosh, I was interviewing, I was like in my final callbacks for all these, like my first software engineering jobs. And there was one of them that was remote. And I was like, gosh, I really hope I get this remote one so that we can move to Arizona. And then it happened. And then COVID just fueled it to happen faster.
Yeah. Let's jump to Sarah.
Well, I was going to say you definitely nailed that resolution in becoming pioneers, because you two were like, I think, instrumental in like helping me during my transition. And I think Ilana's part of Artists Who Code too. And like, it's just been like, so you did it. You did the thing. You were pioneers. But yeah, I'm a classic COVID career changer. But I think it was because I had all this time. I was playing with the Kansas City Symphony at the time. And everything exploded and there was just like nothing to do. And I cannot sit around and not do something. So it was something I'd been interested in, but and I knew of other people who had made the transition. And so I talked to one of my friends. I don't know if anyone knows her, Esther Nam. She's a violist, and now she is an amazing engineer. And I just talked to her, and she was telling me all these different ways to approach learning. She sent me a bunch of different kinds of like websites. And then I asked her about like boot camps, and she told me a few things to like look for in the boot camps, because I know we're going to talk about boot camps in a little bit, but she had like really encouraged to like find the right one. And we found, so actually my husband also did the boot camp with me. It was kind of stressful, but also really, really great to have him there doing the boot camp at the same time. And yeah, that was why I had the time. And then as I got more into it, I was like, we're doing it live.
I think that's how a lot of people feel. And I feel like a lot of people that made the switch have stayed in tech. So that definitely says something about it.
Yeah.
and maybe this is something we'll talk about later, but transferable skills too. I think there are a lot between
Absolutely.
music and tech and
Totally.
arts. Yeah, artists and tech. Cindy?
Yeah, I also transitioned at the beginning of COVID, very similar to Sarah. I graduated from grad school, from music school, right around then, so it's a very, I'm sure it's a scary time for everyone, but you know, like I graduated and didn't know what to do, and the similar story was not very good at just having tons of time in my hands. But I'm also, I think it also contributed. What also contributed was that I was really burned out from music school. I don't know if anyone else relates, you know, the undergrad and masters and that grind. And I think I never envisioned myself to be a full-time freelancer, just in my music career. And I know that looks very different for everyone. And I think those are some of the things that make me, even past the pandemic, so grateful to be in tech as well, because it wasn't just about like making money and having a job. I think there are a lot of other reasons that have like kept us in tech. And I still do play the harp, so like, you know, having that balance is also been really rewarding. So yeah, just adding on a little to Sarah's answer.
Ilana?
So yeah, once again, classic career changer during the pandemic. For me, it was slightly different because although I wasn't in dire financial straits, I was at a pretty vulnerable part in my career as a violist. When COVID hit, I was in New York and I had just moved. So I was restarting my freelancing career after having a lot of stability in my career in Houston, but restarting in a new location, it takes a while to really get your foot in the door. And
They don't teach you that in school.
no, but we all had to hustle at one point or another to get where to any point in our careers. And so I had been really pleased with how much progress I was making in my career as a violist in New York City. But the moment the pandemic hit, I wasn't of the belief that 6 weeks of isolation was going to fix it and everything would go back to normal. I kind of saw the writing on the wall that this was going to be a very long-term damaging event to all of the performance world. And that once gigs started coming back, they were going to be very infrequent, and they would first go to people who had decades of being in the New York City freelancing scene. And I just realized it was going to take so much time for me to get a career that I had wanted. And I wasn't really convinced that I was going to ever be happy as a musician. So it was my first time of being truly unemployed, and gave me time to reflect on, for the first time in my life, whether or not this was actually the right thing for me to like stay as a musician. Definitely felt a lot of crisis, but I'm someone who just has always relied on my gut instinct, and it told me that it wasn't the right thing for me to hold on to my dream of making it as a musician, but making it even means, who knows? And I just took a chance. I was thinking about, first I was like, what kind of career could make me happy other than music, even though music wasn't making me happy. I had no idea, but I just went with something that was the complete opposite of music, in that with music, I felt like there were very few paths that I could take, and everything was prescribed, and it was extremely hard to break and be a trailblazer, kind of the way Scott and Kat have always been. But tech was booming so much, and it was very apparent that there were infinite roads you could go down. And I just was inspired by the fact that there were so many opportunities and ways to find what you wanted. So I just randomly started coding one day in August of 2020. And thankfully, a month later, I found out that my old colleague Scott had started Artists Who Code with Kat, and that really helped me get on track and make it through the first part of my career as a software engineer.
So I'd love to dive deeper into like how, for me, like I tried to teach myself how to code, and I was like, I cannot do this. So I found a UX design bootcamp instead. But I'm curious, like how you decided that I guess four of you wanted to code, go into coding, and how you navigated like choosing that path to go down. And then Cindy, I want to hear about how you decided to go to UX design.
I
Scott, you
can
wanna start?
start. Yeah, I mean, I never imagined myself a coder, never wrote a line of code before I started down this path. I think it was like a pretty cynical, honestly, sort of calculation. It was like, well, they need coders, and it seems like, you know, if I can learn it, it's like a provable skill. You know, it's not like if you can do it, then you can get a job, and it's and so I just I this was before ChatGPT or Artist Code or anything. And so I started Googling around. There was like a Rails tutorial that I worked through. And that was like my first introduction. It was like a Rails tutorial. And I would go to the coffee shop in Queens and I would sit there for like 2 hours in the afternoon and I'd order like, you know, one drink. And I would, once they started giving me the evil eye that like, you've been here too long, like that's when I would leave. But I got working like a working Rails app. And that was sort of like, I was like, okay, if I can do this, I think, and it was sort of, you know, very frustrating, but also kind of fun. And I was like, all right, I think I should pursue this like more seriously. And that's, I started thinking about the boot camp at that point.
For me, the way like coding got on my radar was I actually started off in college as a computer science major with a musical theater minor. I ended up switching to a different type of engineering just because at the time that I was in the program, I was like one of only 2 women in the whole program. And it was different then. Like we didn't have these text editors that like made your lines of code look like beautiful candy and suggest things for you. It was really, really hard to debug. Like debugging was like finding a needle in a haystack. And it was actually quite fun, but I wanted something that like balanced a bit more of like the macro view of things and had more people skills. So I switched to a different kind of engineering. So like left that behind, but I had some intro classes. And then I like didn't think about it for a long time. And in 2015, I had a Broadway show close on me super last minute, like 6 days notice. They told us 2 hours before the show. And it was rough. And I found myself unemployed and I was wondering what to do next. And I was so burned from that experience. Like I thought that Broadway show, which was my first original cast, was going to make me a star. I thought it was going to win all the Tonys. I thought it was going to run forever. And that I'd then move on to TV film where like apparently all the money is. And none of that happened. And so I was like, I'm over this. I want to like quit the biz and try something else. And I was like, how am I going to do this though? I think I need to put out there like on my network. I was like, well, I know I used to have a lot of engineering friends from my college days. I never had a job at that point, like post college, that was like 9 to 5 or in an office or anything. And so it just felt like a huge leap to make. And so I just started with accountability and I posted on Facebook that like I was looking to switch, into something else. And I posted this on the day that we got nominated for 0 Tonys. I didn't bitch about it though, but like that was like my way of processing my disappointment. And of all people, like I was expecting my traditional like engineering undergrad friends to be the ones to be like, hey, like maybe like let's talk, whatever. The person who reached out to me was this amazing person named Sarah Parnicky, who I met at USC dancing on the table at a frat party freshman year. And we ended up being in like a dance company together. She's an opera singer. And turned out she'd been in New York. I didn't even know this. But she needed a survival job. And unlike most of the people, like I think before the pandemic, survival jobs were typically like bartending, nannying, tutoring, because those are flexible. She had done something different and she temped at a startup. I didn't even know what a startup was. And she told me about it. Basically, she hooked me up, and within a month, this was like quite lucky of me, but it also like spoke to the strengths of having an undergrad engineering degree. I got a job at this startup, and I was doing actually what I studied in college, which was systems engineering and kind of like connecting the dots between like business functions and tech functions. Long story short, it was really intense. But what I learned was that the software engineers at our company could do really amazing things for me. Like they could program something custom to help me get through a problem that was taking me hours. And they were getting paid the most and they were allowed to work from home. I was like, what is this? So, and I talked to we had 2 engineers. They'd both gone to boot camp. So that's when boot camps got on my radar. This was 2015. And it's kind of like the beginning of when boot camps were starting to like really percolate. And so that's how it got on my radar. anyway, I ended up going back to Broadway after that. So I've been back and forth many times, but that's how it got on my radar. And then also there's one of the original inspirations for Artists Who Code is my cousin, Genevieve. She went to MIT and studied computer science, but she also was a professional Latin ballroom dancer. And she kind of did both for a long time. She was like working in Boston and then hopping on the bus twice a week into New York to study with like the best teachers. And her boss would let her code on the bus when like Wi-Fi on the bus was new. And so that was also a thing. I was like, I'm bookmarking this for the future. So when shit went down and later when I was really over it, I was like, okay, that's the field. And like Scott said, then I did some extra research because I considered other things. I was like, should I be like a social media manager? I kind of do that. We just like, I looked at salaries, starting salaries, because I'm like, I am in a later point in my life. I don't want to start, if I'm starting at the bottom rung, I want that rung to be high. And so the answer was tech.
Yeah, makes sense. Ilana?
So sorry, I just want to like, can you repeat the question? Just want to make sure that I'm like answering the right question.
Oh,
here.
yeah. No, I'm just curious, like how you decided to go into coding in particular.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, it just seemed that like, I wanted to go into tech, and the most like, I honestly just like, I joined LinkedIn for the first time and like started looking at like job postings, and I saw that there were so many that were for software engineers, not at that point, not necessarily junior software engineers, but I just saw that more than any other option, there were just like more prolific opportunities for software engineers. And at any rate, no matter what you aim to do in tech, it never hurts to know how to code, at least at a level. So it just seemed like a no-brainer to start there. I honestly didn't think I was going to like it because I had just been for half my life so focused on music. And in middle and high school, teachers saw that I had a natural ability when it came to arts and humanities. And so they really encouraged me to spend more time focused on that. They didn't even like encourage me to, consider putting a little bit more effort into like science and math as a result, which is a shame because it turns out that I'm not as bad at math as I thought I was. But I really wasn't convinced that I was going to like coding. For me, it was just like an act of desperation. Like I need a new career. And it was just so gratifying that when I started learning how to code, it actually was so much more interesting than I thought. And that it takes a ton of creativity. And we've mentioned before that there is that overlap of skill set between musicians and, being like in various tech positions, and especially when it comes to coding, the amount of creativity with problem solving is absolutely essential for being a good software engineer, being good at coding. And I felt like so uplifted that I could, at the idea that I could actually do this. And so I just, started learning how to code. And I didn't feel alone because by that point there were so many tutorials on YouTube. So I would just like code alongside like people do it, like demonstrating beginner concepts, and then finding Artists Who Code. I found a lot of people who were more than happy to sit down with me and to teach me things. And, within a few months, I found myself at a boot camp, making really strong connections with my cohort mates. And so I've never felt alone, which is a real blessing. And people who started learning how to code on their own in like the 2010s, it wasn't quite like that. So I felt really lucky to have all those resources. And my boot camp, every boot camp has its flaws, but for me, it gave everything I needed for me to like really jump off and continue learning on my own and with friends until I got my first job in July of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I definitely want to dive into boot camps in a bit, but first let's jump to Sarah and then Cindy.
Everyone has like such really like planned out ways in which they got into tech, but I feel like I more like fell slowly into it. When I first started doing things like during the pandemic, I was like, I want to learn something And I didn't really have like an end goal in mind of like, I'm going to have a job at the end of this. Like, it's just something that I'm like curious about, just having fun. And I think it was just maybe because I was having fun that I got a lot more serious. Is that like kind of like a musician thing, you know? It's like, okay, now now I have to be the best at it because it's
Yeah.
fun. And
Oh, that's, yeah.
you know.
I definitely feel that.
So I just kept like doing more and more, and then and I think maybe same as Ilana, like I was surprised with how much I liked it. And that's what just kept me going. And then I started a boot camp shortly after, and the same thing, like never feeling alone. It was like I have had just like people help me who I'm like, why would you help me? You don't know me, or you know, that kind of thing, and that like kind of sense of community has kept me here.
Yeah, absolutely. Cindy?
Yeah, so I went into UX design, so I guess it's slightly different, but also I went through, a boot camp process. And I, wanted something to learn a skill that would lead to a job prospect. But I also wanted to find something else I'm passionate about. And I don't know, I kind of just dismissed like most of the options when I did look at what the bootcamp offerings are. Although hearing you guys talk about it, maybe I was, too silly to dismiss the engineering aspect of it. But when I saw UX design, I first of all, I had never heard of it. I didn't even know that existed, and I think design it is a little newer field in a way, or it just hasn't evolved in the same way. But I was really interested in it. I did some like free courses. I did some research and just talked to a lot of people who are in the field to make sure, like, what do you do? Like, is that something I'm interested in? And I think like what everyone has said, the problem solving and creativity aspect of it is definitely something that excited me. I feel like I'm able to utilize the way of thinking I have and my soft skills in this field as well. And the versatility of like tech, you get to work for various types of companies, various types of product. You can, make an impact, or I guess work for an evil corporation. It doesn't matter, but there's just so much out there, so many possibilities. So those definitely were really exciting to me. And I think something, correct me if I'm wrong in front of all these developers here, but I think what might be a little different in UX that was more exciting to me is there's just so much human interaction. So UX design, including, like the research process where you're actually like talking to researchers and user interviews to try to understand them, to like usually you have a more meaningful full schedule on your calendar of like talking to different stakeholders, including engineers, but like anyone else in the company, trying to understand how those stakeholders are thinking too. I think that understanding and human interaction aspect was like extra exciting to me, maybe, and that's probably why.
No, that's me too. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious to know how your boot camp program was, and like I know there's this kind of a negative impression of boot camp programs because they do this job guarantee, or because people don't necessarily always get a job like right after it, or they don't necessarily get what they're looking for out of it. I'm curious what you all think of the boot camp programs. And for me, it was like I needed it to just like streamline my learning process. I had no tech knowledge, so I was just like, I'm going to go through this just to learn the process. And then I know I have to do work outside of the boot camp to get a job. And I heavily relied on like networking and just like being active in communities. And but did anyone else have an opinion on how their bootcamp program was and if you would recommend it?
I can speak to this. I feel really sad that there are so many boot camps that are still making these wild impressions on people that attending their program means that you're going to get a job. I think that it can be very disingenuous and a little predatory. It's very unfortunate. People need to remember that these are for-profit education programs. And so they're doing whatever it takes to get people to go into their program. That being said, I was really lucky that because I had gotten to know so many people that went to boot camps before I did, I came into my boot camp program with a very different mindset than most of my cohort mates did. For me, it was not a way to get a job. For me, it wasn't a way to make myself a completely fully formed software engineer at the end of the program after end of just 3 months. Nobody is ready in general most of the time. No one is ready to just get a job right away outside of your after graduating your boot camp. For me, what made my boot camp a really valuable experience was that I saw it as a set curriculum that could guide me into being ready to prepare for my first interviews, and a way for me to learn about very in-demand technologies and develop a true tech stack, and for me to have some sort of portfolio. My boot camp didn't have me do like many projects, but what I really loved about it is that the last 5 weeks was spent, everyone dedicated every day, all day, to one solo project that was full stack. And that was really valuable because I had this really major project that I was able to speak to and guide my interviewers through whenever they asked me about it. It had, features that were fully developed that, included it wasn't just the bare minimum. It was, utilizing external libraries for data visualization. It was utilizing third-party APIs and just giving extra emphasis to that. So for me, it's just boot camps can be so valuable, especially boot camps that provide actually helpful resources for post-boot camp career development, especially making introductions to companies that are hiring. But more than anything, it's just it's a guided learning process with resources of teachers who can help you debug things as you go along. And even better, just making connections to your cohort mates for mental stability and support, but also meeting people that will, have jobs at companies that you might want to work for later on. I've contacted, whenever I've done a job search, I look at where my cohort mates are today. And if I see an opportunity for, a job opening at their company, I immediately reach out to them. And they're always really excited that I'm reaching out and they want to help. People really make really good connections and friendships in boot camps. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Definitely. Does anyone else have?
Yeah, I feel the same way about the boot camp being they're there to set a curriculum and help you help you decide what to learn. I feel just because there's so much out there and you don't know what you don't know, and so if you're just starting out, how are you supposed to know where to start and what path to go on? So it was nice to just have that set curriculum, and we had similar, with projects and how every week built upon the last, and so that was for me, it was very nice to follow along, I guess. And I feel very lucky, I guess, to have gone to a boot camp. They didn't guarantee a job at the end, but they did guarantee career help for I think it's infinite. I have gone back. Yeah. So you can I'm still part of the Slack, and the alumni Slack, and you can go in and be hey, I'm unemployed. I was laid off. I need help. And they're there for you. So that's nice. I mean, maybe it's hard to hear when you're oh, well, that boot camp is guaranteeing a job. But actually, in retrospect, I feel this is the better deal. And it was also a more local boot camp. They don't have it in Kansas City anymore because now everything is remote. But at the time, they had a Kansas City location, and someone who like they were dedicated to being in Kansas City. So our career coach, she had like tons of connections in the city, and that's like, I mean, that's how I ended up getting my first job, is because on one of the like career days, I like had a conversation with someone who at a company, and he was like, well, we don't have any openings right now, but you know, like keep us in mind. And then like a month or two later, he was like, hey, I met you at that career day, you know. And so like if I hadn't have had this like connection with him from the boot camp, then I felt like things wouldn't have gone the way they did. So yeah, my thoughts on the boot camp are like, you know, do a lot of research into which one you're going to do, or like make sure you've talked to someone who's gone there. But like I'm very happy with what I got out of the boot camp.
Awesome.
I think something to address is like the macro view of like the tech landscape as a whole over the years. So a lot of boot camps were kind of popping up in response to this time in like the mid 2010s when there was huge demand. Like every company was becoming a tech company, whether you were fashion or, you know, whatever, ticketing on Broadway. And there was this huge demand for engineers and a willingness to hire junior entry-level engineers. And there was not enough supply. And so these boot camps started popping up, and they kind of could make this guarantee because that's what their outcomes were. Like I did my research. I talked to people, like I kind of got on the boot camp train a few years after that in like 2018. But all the people I had talked to, they were like, yeah, I mean, like I got like picked up by Slack like 2 weeks before I graduated. I was like, sweet, I'm going to be good. It was not like that for us just a few years later. And so it's kind of helpful to think about it like real estate. Like there's like times when houses were really cheap and times where you couldn't afford anything, and times when like New York was hot and then times when this other neighborhood was hot. And so I think as long as boot camps, like I'm surprised if any of them still make that guarantee now, because it's gotten harder and harder as more people find out about this path into tech, as all of those junior engineers who got in 5-6 years ago have marinated into senior level. They don't really need juniors anymore. It's gotten really saturated. But all that being said, as long as they don't make that guarantee, I think boot camps are amazing. They give you an option that is not grad school, the cost of grad school, the length of grad school, and it's extremely practical. And you walk out with like a hard, tangible skill. I think that like with boot camp, something that's often misleading in the way it's talked about is that, as Ilana highlighted, there's this part before boot camp where you need to start learning to code and test into the boot camp. And then the part after boot camp, before you get that first job, those are the areas that you can feel really alone and unguided. And that's why like we created Artists Who Code to like guide people through the whole thing. And then, finally, it's just like, there are many different boot camps. It's not as developed an educational system and quite different from colleges, but like we mentored 300 something people through, I think probably every boot camp that existed, many that have since closed. And all the different boot camps had like their strengths, but like in the end, they all taught you something very real and difficult and interesting. And for what I think, even though it's expensive, when I ran the numbers against going to grad school and all that, it was like comparatively quite cheap. So
yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to go the boot camp route, because I didn't want to go back to school. I didn't want to spend a ton of money.
And also the time commitment of grad school versus
and
3
like my
to
boot
4
camp
months.
Exactly. Mine was self-paced, so I could just do it at whatever time period that suited my schedule. I know not all of them are like that, but it gave me options, which was nice. So I want to pivot a little bit into job hunting. So there are a ton of different approaches to job hunting, and some people send out like 200 job applications a week. I took a more targeted approach and focused on like networking and doing some other stuff. What were all of your approaches for getting your first job in tech?
Yeah, my approach was the shotgun, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach. I was like, I'm an actor. I'm used to rejection. I'm just going to get rejected a bunch of times. It's going to be fun. I'll just do a million job applications. I'll track them all in a spreadsheet. And, it's a numbers game. And the more I apply to, I'll get a job eventually. And I think that was a mistake. Rejection hurt in an entirely different way. It was like this, I thought the scar would be there, and it was not. It was like an entirely new form of like rejection. And even getting auto rejected is like a downer. So the approach that I sort of pivoted to in the end, and that I would recommend, and that I would do now if I were job searching again, is a much more targeted thing where like you apply to fewer places, but are like much more intentional and take more time with each one. Like reaching out to, if I'm interested in a role, I'll stalk the employees and the company on LinkedIn. I'll learn about the company. I'll learn about the role. I will reach out to an employee of the company who I think may be amenable to my like cold solicitation, and I'll be like, hey, like I saw this job, looks interesting. Do you have a few minutes to chat about it, or would you mind giving me a referral? And like try to highlight the things that we have in common, and like try to go in sort of through the referral mechanism instead of like cold apply through the front door. And the job I ended up getting was through a college friend who, we were at brunch one day in New York, and I was like, oh, I'm going to this coding boot camp, and he was working at this company. He's like, do you know React? It's this like, new JavaScript framework. He's like, yeah, I learned it 2 days ago. I'm good to go. And he's like, all right. And passed my name. He wasn't an engineer, but he passed my name through. And that's the job I ended up getting. So,
That's amazing.
yeah, just like kind of a more focused, like more network-based approach is like what ended up working and what I'd recommend.
Yeah. Anyone else have any other approaches?
I can go. I mean, so when I got my last job, where was a startup that I worked at for the last 3 years, I did the same approach. I did everything I could, apply to any job I saw, whether it made sense or not. And it got me a few offers at the end, but I think what contributed to it wasn't just that I applied to everything. It was one, well, also that was around like early 2021. So like the job market was also doing really well. But I think at that time I've talked to enough people. I've done enough networking. I started speaking the language, like after boot camp, there really needs to be a period where you like practice being in the industry, and that boot camp probably doesn't talk about as much because they want to show like, oh, we've taught you everything. But at that point, I've done some like freelance project, whether paid or not. I've just kind of started like going to so many webinars, and I started gathering experience. And I think those things contributed to it. And I actually at first got like a part-time internship with a tiny startup via going to like the Austin Startup Week on just like a virtual event. And I randomly met a guy who said, oh, my wife is hiring someone junior, like, you want to do this internship? And with that experience, even though the job search was so difficult and I applied to so many random jobs, I think that experience in like a B2B startup space led me to like a better B2B startup. I was laid off about almost 2 months ago now, so I'm in the job search again, and I have found, even though I've like applied to a lot of reach companies or just different things I might want to do, I've gotten most responses from like things that are relevant to my experience and companies that I'm actually like excited to work for. So yeah, I definitely agree with what Scott said, and maybe my path was a little different, but I think all of that is a part of the process.
Yeah, I definitely find that it's like not valuable for me to invest time in applying for companies that I don't want to work for, because it'll show that I'm not excited. Like when I'm interviewing, when I'm like trying to come up with a cover letter, I'm like, how do I kind of phrase this? And yeah, so it's tough, but from what it sounds like, a more targeted, narrow approach is probably more valuable in in the long run, but everyone's different. So it's, yeah. So I would like, one of my biggest struggles when looking for my first tech job was communicating how my experience as a musician translated into tech. So I had a recruiter one time. He was like, what did you like study in school, or what classes did you take? I'm trying to figure out how to like tell the team like how your skills from music translate to this job. And so I took me a while to kind of figure out how to frame what I did as a musician. And it took some like building experience that's what really helped get my foot in the door. But curious if anyone has any ways they approach that, and like communicating your value to potential employers.
Well, going just based off of your word, being able to communicate is something that all musicians have to know how to do. Anything from, when you're in a string quartet and playing with 3 other people who have, we have to come to consensus on so many different decisions, and you have to communicate your thoughts and reasoning very well, to teaching 4-year-olds very complex ideas about how to play an instrument when they don't even know how to count to 100 yet. So where that really comes into play when you're actually working as a software engineer or UX UI designer, you have to communicate to colleagues that are doing the same thing as you. For instance, pair programming, in which you might be working on the same same code as another person. You're working together on a specific project, and they know the same lingo as you. So similar to like being in a string quartet, or not to denigrate my non-technically savvy coworkers who have to understand the concepts I'm explaining to them. They're not 4-year-olds who don't know how to count to 100, but they don't necessarily know what I'm talking about. It's not the same conversation between 2 software engineers if I'm talking to like a product manager. But I have to be able to communicate to them why I'm doing something, what it is, and have to do it in a way that makes sense to someone who doesn't have a full technical understanding of what I'm doing. So communication is a big part of it. So that's my first thought. I think Kat also had something that she wanted to say.
Yes, that's all golden. And to add to that, something that we found from coaching so many people through this, and even ourselves, is that like there is this trap that I think anyone, not just artists, like falls into when they're making a career pivot, which is that like you have this temptation to hang on to your previous self and all of those accomplishments and put them all down as like these beautiful heavy bullet points on your resume, when they don't really have that much to do directly with the job you're applying for. And so like the way we coached people through this is that, think of your LinkedIn as like if I'm a musical theater actor, I've done a bunch of different shows. Like if I'm going to go audition for like a Rodgers and Hammerstein classic musical, like I'm not going to bring the same material or wear the same clothes I would bring to a Hamilton audition, even if I can do both kinds of shows. Like I have to come in like wearing kind of like a pseudo costume and like really highlighting certain parts of myself. And so we really tell people like, if you're looking to pivot into software engineering, at that point in your time, you got to update your LinkedIn and your resume to be like 90% software engineering and maybe 10% arts. Even if that's not the ratio of it over the course of your life, for that moment in your time where you're looking to get a software engineering job, that's what you got to do. And you also it's hard, but like you shouldn't really like lead with the arts part of you, like lead with what you're passionate about in tech. And then the arts part is like this beautiful cherry on top at the end to make you really memorable. And then if they're curious, you can talk about it more. And then kind of communicating what we bring from the arts. So there's so much, and it's hard to explain it in like a 30-minute like screening interview with people. But like I remember my brother coached me on this because he's kind of the reverse of me. Like he pivoted from tech into musical theater and rap. And so when I first interviewed for that startup back in 2015, I was like, what am I going to talk about? I'm just going to be really honest that like I have never worked in any sort of office job since college, but like, what do I say? But I told him, I was like, but I'm willing to work so hard because like I bring all of this grit from all of us know what it's like to be rejected, to like work so many hours, hundreds of hours at something that like might not even turn into a job, and compete with so many people who are extremely good. And so he was like, you should communicate that. And basically, so I just communicated that I was like, even if I haven't directly done this thing before, I bring all of this grit, and I kind of painted a picture for him of like what it's like to try and make it on Broadway, and like how that I would like translate all of that into like this new thing that I was very interested in. And then also like, I find it really useful to like, I had my kind of like capstone bootcamp project brought together my 2 worlds. Like I built a very like technical project that had, it was like kind of like a game and like learning tool for memorizing lines for a script. And so that was like a good way to kind of like deliver like who I was like in one package that people could digest very quickly. And then something else that like my dad coached me on that like we coach a lot of people on too, which is that like also don't apologize and hide for your past of being an artist or being whatever it is you were before. Like, and in fact, like you might want to preempt and like own those questions that might come up, like, oh, like, what did you study? Like, what did you study? Like, what does this have to do with whatever? Like, why is there like a 3-year gap here, like in your resume? Like, get ahead of those questions and be ready. And so, yeah, those are all of the tips.
Yeah, that's amazing. Completely spot on. Cindy?
Yeah, I'll just follow up real quick. I agree with what everyone has said, and it's really helpful for me also. And I think something as musician, like Kat has said, that we're really resilient and adaptable. And being in a designer in a job search, we have less technical skills in a way. Like we can show our designs, we can show the process, but what they care more about is how you navigate it through the design, how you navigate it through the challenge. So I think instead of telling them like, hey, my music experience, brought XYZ, really show them like how your music experience helped you, like those kind of soft skills, resilience has shown through in your work and in those challenging situations. Another thing, I don't know if it's similar for software developers, I found in the field of design and music are both fields where people go like, wow, you're so naturally talented and gifted. You're just amazing at this. You must be, from birth. And we know that's not true in music, dance, art, whatever and in design also. And, how do you really communicate that? It's 99%. So practice, the persistence, just really giving up other things in life to work on something you're passionate about. So I think, yeah, communicating those points are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add to that, even like leadership skills, collaboration, it's just work ethic, like you said. They're just everything you need to be successful in another role. Like to me, working in this field, like it's going to sound bad, but it's like easier for me to do this than it was to do music because I had to work so hard to get to where I was, and it was just a 24/7 like grind. And yeah, so I don't think people necessarily realize how much we have to do to get to where we are, and what we actually do too as artists. So yeah. So I think I'll switch to what's kind of surprised you the most about working in the field, and what have you kind of enjoyed? What have you not enjoyed? If anyone has any insight.
I have something. I think it surprised me at how willing a lot of engineers and even seniors are willing to say, I don't know. Like I feel like in the music world, maybe it was a little bit harder for people to say, I don't know. Like when you go to a teacher and ask them, like there was never a chance of I don't know. But I've certainly taken like issues to seniors, and they'll say, I don't know, actually, let's work on it together, and that like willingness to do to work on something together has surprised me in a good way, that it's like, okay, it's okay that I don't know this, because they've been doing this for way longer and they also don't know it, and we're gonna figure it out together. And so that's been a really nice surprise. Another thing that's really surprised me is just how much I like doing it, and how much I like, I don't know, like maybe the lifestyle, I guess, just like being able to work from home, being able to be a parent, and, always being at home for bedtime, because I think like if I were still like, a musician full time, I think I would miss bedtime a lot. So that's something like that's really been a nice thing for me, is becoming a parent, is like the flexibility. I know not all jobs are flexible, but I definitely like have gone out of my way to find jobs that are going to be okay with not only having a parent, but also being able to take like musical outside gigs. Like I'll be subbing with Baltimore Symphony next week, or like I'm gonna take off time in May to play with Artisphere. And Emily, I think you've been able to do that too, where you I don't know.
Yeah, I think once I was able to like kind of figure out my schedule, I was able to kind of make my own opportunities and able to fit in stuff. And I love that people are supportive of that. And they think that's like, that helps you do your job better. And that's what I love, like that supportive atmosphere, at least that I've experienced.
Yeah, and going back to something that Catherine said in the beginning of like, you want to have these like amazing musical like moments, and like not having to say yes to everything, like not having to say, yes, I'll take this job because I need the money. But you know what? That opportunity like really speaks to me. And so I am going to do it. And it's going to be a really amazing musical experience, and not having to do some crappy freelance thing because you have to, to pay rent or whatever it is. So that's been a really nice thing for me.
I think something that is awesome about software is that it is in every industry. And so being in tech, I guess there is a tech industry, but being in software means that you can work in wildly different industries. Like my first job was at a clothing marketplace startup. And like the office was in Soho, and Kendall Jenner would come by to like browse the $5,000 Rick Owens jackets that they had like on the second floor. And like everybody was like dripping in swag. And it was very cool. And now my job is in defense, and my boss is like testifying before the Senate and like briefing generals at the Pentagon, and like learning about and working in these like wildly different industries is very cool. And there's so many more out there that are interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Like I just started a new job at the beginning of the year that it feels in many ways like my dream job. Part of my switch was hoping that I could eventually help people like myself, like namely musicians in some way. And I'm officially doing that now. I just started a really good, like working for a really cool small startup that essentially invests in musical artists and their individual tracks. We offer to buy out like a track, and we like work with them to negotiate deals. Musicians can still like, ask to have a profit share, so they're not completely like losing any control over their song. And it's like, this money could go towards rent. This money could go towards like, funding their next recording and their studio album, funding their next like small tour. Cause we're not going after like the Taylor Swifts of the world. We're going after independent artists who are, not signed with major labels yet. And I see firsthand how the people on our sourcing team who manage the deals and artist relations, like they're really not just financially taking care of the musicians they work with, but also mentally and emotionally there for them, because we're all like really tied to our work that we put a lot of time into and heart. And it's really cool. I feel like I'm back in the music industry in a completely different way, but the data I work with is, songs and genres and artists, and it just feels really cool. And I see every day, the artists we work with every Friday during our all hands will feature a deal that we just did, and we'll play the actual track. It's really funny because sometimes it's a very explicit track too. And so, like in a company setting, that's just kind of funny. But it's like, so I never imagined that this early on I'd be working for a music-based company, let alone a music-based company that isn't just monetizing off of musicians, like, several streaming platforms, but like actually helping. So that's kind of like tying to my original draw to tech. It's just like you have so many different ways to go, so many different paths. And I feel really lucky that 2.5 years into working as a software engineer, I'm like at that original goal essentially. And So, sky's the limit. It's just hard to get in.
Yeah. Once you get your foot in the door and have that experience, I think you have a lot of opportunities to grow.
And I just want to share a slightly different perspective as well. I agree so much with what everyone said, and if you give me the choice again, I will 100% do the same transition. But the transition is hard, and the tech industry is ever shifting, and I will say it's not the most stable in terms of job stability industry right now. And I was just a part of the layoff, and I guess these are not surprising things, but things that became really real as the work goes on. And also, I don't know if this is a designer thing, but I was the only designer in my previous company, and I was laid off even though I was the only one. Where I think of it kind of like a harpist in the orchestra. They wouldn't offer a full-time job as much as they need a principal flute. So I think there are definitely realistic parts of it. It's not all rainbow and sunshine. There are bad days at work, just like any job. However, I think it was a really freeing experience, which I didn't expect. I realize now I'm not confined to only being a musician. When I'm unemployed, I'm not oh, okay, what gig can I take? And there are just so many ways I can figure out my life. And I think that's a really cool experience.
Absolutely. Anything else? I know we're at time. So maybe we'll end with one last question, and that's, do you have any advice for anyone looking to switch into tech? And we can do a quick round robin, and then we'll end.
I can start. To make it this transition, you have to be brave. Reach out to everyone you've known and not be afraid to do that. Not be afraid to pass up opportunities that might not seem ideal or appropriate for your skill set. If someone is hey, would you be able to build this? And you're in React and you've never touched React before, just say yeah, sure. Just say yes to everything within reason. Be brave, because otherwise it's just gonna possibly be more overwhelming than you could imagine.
Anyone else?
My one-liner is go all in. The strategy I have seen that does not work is I'm still acting, and I really want something part-time to replace bartending, and so I'm just gonna tinker with this in my spare time. That never works. You gotta turn down work. I'm going all in this. I'm gonna study really hard, and I'm gonna try to get a full-time job at the end. That worked for us. I think it can still work. And use ChatGPT. You have a free personal tutor now who's incredible. So
yeah.
And I would say be passionate. I hope that you're not doing the job transition just 100% purely for the money or the job. I find something passionate about what you want to do, and really hone in on that, really grab onto that, because this journey is difficult. And you want to, be able to do that for a purpose.
Sarah, Kat, anything?
I think when I was going through your questions, I had written down just almost exactly what everyone's been saying. Just do it. It's not going to hurt anything to just go all in and do it. So yeah, that's also my advice.
Everyone's already said a lot of the things I was thinking about. So the last thing is that don't let what you do for work or what you think about doing for work define who you are. That's one of the hardest things for people, is that they feel like they are kind of killing this part of themselves that you are giving up as an artist. And that's not what it means. In fact, like Ilana said, you are being brave. You're trying out something new, and you're still an artist, and you can always come back. We all have something we didn't get to talk about too much, but I was so interested to hear snippets of everyone else's stories, is how do we still maintain a relationship with the arts today? And I'm figuring that out, and it changes from time to time. Like Sarah, I've had a baby, and that's changed a lot of things. But anyway, yeah, just let your curiosity to learn that definitely drove you through the arts take over here too, and that persistence. But don't let it, just because you try it doesn't mean you have to do it. If you try it and you're not enjoying it, peace out and do something else. Like, good for you. You learned something.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And as artists, we have the skills to be able to be successful in anything that we do. So I think just keep that in mind. So awesome. Well, I wish we could talk for, I feel like there's so much more to talk about. We could talk for hours more, but maybe we could do a follow-up session at some point. I just want to thank everyone for being here and for all of these amazing insights. And yeah, I will keep everyone updated if we do something else, but thank you all for tuning in and hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.